Society has lied to you. In our modern world, we are made to believe that we must always be working, always be productive, to never stop being efficient, and that if we do, we are failing, wasting potential. But that is not true, and I will tell you why. It is impossible to always be productive, to always be working, and to always be engaged in action with the goal of producing. The irony is sharp. The obsession with constant productivity leads to the very outcome it seeks to avoid. We lose focus. We burn out. The mind rebels against the monotony, and we find ourselves numb, tired, and uninspired. Rest is not weakness. Rest is power. 1 day a week, maybe not even the full day, is all you need to recalibrate. The key is purposeful disengagement. It's not about laziness or giving up. It's about deep reflection, reading, walking, watching something meaningful, thinking without direction, writing without agenda. This type of rest is fuel. It prepares your mind for the next round of engagement. It sharpens your focus. It makes you more creative, more grounded, more philosophical. In this video, we will walk through the teachings of the Stoics and understand, through reason and lived wisdom, why rest is not only beneficial, it is necessary. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Stoic Understanding of Rhythm. The Stoics believed in living in accordance with nature. That did not mean walking barefoot in the forest or meditating in caves. It meant aligning your internal life with the natural rhythms of the world. Nature moves in cycles. The sun rises and sets. The moon waxes and wanes. Tides flow in and out. Seasons change. There is a time to work and a time to retreat, a time to engage and a time to reflect. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "Time is a river, a violent current of events, glimpsed once and already carried past us, and another follows and is gone." He was not merely observing change, he was reminding himself that our actions should reflect the ebb and flow of life. Constant output defies nature's pattern. A Stoic life respects tempo. It is an ancient but urgent truth. We must learn not only when to act, but also when to deliberately pause. The Stoics saw time as a flowing current, and they understood that forcing ourselves to swim ceaselessly against it leads to ruin. Acting without pause erodes the clarity of our judgment, depletes our emotional reserves, and leads to shallow, repetitive, and often meaningless output. Rest in Stoic practice is not a concession to fatigue, but a powerful return to stillness, a strategic recalibration of our judgment, our values, and our chosen direction in life. To act mindfully, we must first have the capacity to think clearly. This requires quiet. It requires space. It requires rhythm. The mind, like the body, performs best when given structured cycles of strain and recovery. Even the most noble intentions falter under the weight of relentless strain. Rest restores the internal compass that guides right action. In today's world, where hustle is glorified and exhaustion is worn like a badge of honor, we often mistake busyness for purpose. We confuse motion for progress. We fall into the trap of thinking that the faster we move, the more we matter. But the Stoics remind us, not all movement is meaningful. Movement by itself proves nothing. It is easy to be busy and miss the point entirely. Right action, measured, principled, and aligned with virtue, is superior to endless activity. Purposeful rest is what brings our action into harmony with our values. It is during rest that we evaluate our trajectory, ask if we are working toward the right things, and allow our motivations to settle. Without rest, we are caught in a fog, sprinting without seeing the road. Seneca would argue that a man who is always moving without reflecting is not truly living, but merely existing in a state of perpetual reaction. He likened it to a ship that never docks. a vessel that keeps itself in motion until its timbers crack and it runs aground from exhaustion. That image is not just poetic, but prophetic. It describes the quiet erosion of self-awareness. Without pause, we become disconnected from our purpose. We lose the inner thread that connects action to intention. The Stoics call us to dock, to return to the harbor of thought, to reflect not sporadically but consistently as a form of spiritual hygiene, to slow down and ask, is my labor serving my soul, or am I becoming a servant to labor? This question requires silence, solitude, and the courage to confront the motivations behind our effort. It demands the willingness to listen to what is often drowned out by the noise of obligation. Rest in the Stoic mind is not indulgence, it is discipline. It is a deliberate, even courageous act of self-preservation. It is a conscious, virtuous decision to preserve one's reason, one's clarity, and one's dignity. When you choose to rest, you are not escaping life. You are stepping back to see it more clearly. It is a daily and weekly ritual where we separate ourselves from the urgent noise of society to contemplate the important truths of existence. In that stillness, we reconnect with our foundational beliefs. Rest is not merely permission, it is a necessity. It is not what we do when we're done working. It is what we do in order to work well, live well, and think well. It is the invisible preparation that determines the visible quality of our actions. It is the quiet sharpening of the sword before battle. It is the space between notes that makes the music beautiful. The Stoics teach that meaning is found not in the chaos of constant doing, but in the quiet of reflection. When we rest, we are not stopping life. We are engaging with it on a deeper level. We are acknowledging that our internal world needs tending just as much as our external tasks. We begin to see rest not as withdrawal, but as anchoring, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Rest gives us space to return not just to our tasks, but to ourselves, with more clarity, more purpose, and more strength. And in that return, we move forward, not with frenzy, but with force rooted in philosophy. Begin building your week with rhythm, not as a luxury, but as a foundation for clarity. Just as the Stoics valued routine tempered with reflection, you too can carve out time that is not dominated by urgency, but filled with awareness. Schedule a few hours of purposeful disconnection, not random breaks, but sacred time dedicated to recentering your mind. Read something thoughtful that elevates your thinking or expands your sense of perspective. Listen to this channel's Stoic videos, not as background noise, but as prompts to stir contemplation. Engage in practices that invite your mind to breathe. Reflect deeply on your current path. Don't just glance at your calendar or your to-do list. Ask meaningful questions about the direction your energy is flowing. Is your work aligned with your values? Are your habits sculpting the kind of person you aim to become? Ask yourself often, am I moving in the right direction or simply moving? Let this question echo through your rest, guiding your recalibration. Allow your inner voice, not your obligations or external pressures, to guide you. In doing so, your week will no longer be a frantic rush, but a deliberate rhythm of action and restoration. Chapter 2. Rest as an exercise of reason. Stoicism emphasizes logos, reason, as the guiding principle of life. Every action must align with reason, and every thought must pass through the gate of rational examination. To act without rest is to compromise this fundamental Stoic value. Think of this. If you never rest, how do you assess your path? How do you engage in the kind of reflection that reveals mistakes, that highlights better options? Seneca warned against this when he said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Unrested, Unreflective minds waste time in action that lacks clarity. True rest is not escape. It is an active and deliberate use of time to regain clarity and sharpen the faculties of judgment. A walk in nature is not mere leisure. It reconnects us with the living order of the universe. A moment of journaling isn't just reflective, it's a tool for translating emotion into insight, confusion into structure. A quiet afternoon reading philosophy isn't stepping away from life, but diving deeper into its undercurrents to find enduring wisdom. These acts are not diversions from living, but its most potent forms when approached with awareness. They are strategic investments in deeper thinking, in slowing the mental churn so we can hear what we otherwise miss in the noise. True rest realigns us with the pulse of nature and the clarity of reason. It creates a stillness that allows the ripples of our scattered thoughts to settle into still waters, where truth can be clearly seen. In that tranquility, we begin to understand the patterns of our thoughts, what drives us, what disturbs us, and what we must refine. Rest allows us to zoom out and witness the trajectory of our thoughts and choices with a philosopher's eye, to gain the detached perspective required for sound judgment. We are no longer caught in the blur of daily demands, but able to see where we are going, why we are going there, and what we must do to go further. In that gentle pause, we often find not just rest, but renewal. It is not simply the absence of activity, it is a space in which dormant clarity reawakens. A mental and emotional reset unfolds, one that reestablishes the balance between action and reflection, intention and instinct, thought and habit. We are reminded that we are not machines meant to churn endlessly, programmed for output without pause. We are living beings, spiritual and rational creatures who must return to center if we hope to live well and act with excellence. In this pause, we do not disengage from life, we engage with it more honestly. When we step away from the noise and obligations of the day, we are not retreating, we are stepping into the presence of our own mind. We are turning inward to observe the mechanics of our thinking, to witness the silent undercurrents that guide our decisions. This is where self-awareness is born, not in the constant motion of tasks, but in the rare pauses where we ask, why am I doing what I am doing? This is where the clouded emotions and reactive patterns dissolve and truth begins to surface. This is the space where fear gives way to reason, where distractions fall silent and the mind gathers itself. Reason demands space to breathe. It requires air and quiet, like a flame needs oxygen and stillness to grow and burn brightly. It cannot thrive in the thick fog of exhaustion, nor can it emerge through the deafening drum of endless tasking that steals our awareness. Rest grants it that space, room to stretch out, to settle, to orient itself toward wisdom, and to speak with quiet authority. In this sacred space of renewal, reason begins to reassert itself like a rising tide. Slowly, gently, it washes away the residue of chaos and reclaims its rightful role as guide and governor. It returns to us with clarity, with the memory of what really matters, and with the judgment we abandoned in haste. We recover discernment, the ability to perceive what is essential and what is not, to separate the signal from the noise, the urgent from the important. We recover the power to pause before reacting, to consider consequences before charging forward, to choose with intention, and to act with dignity and self-possession. From this rested clarity, we gain a vision rooted not in stress, but in stillness. We are no longer pulled by the frantic gravity of unchecked urgency. We begin to walk rather than run, and we walk with purpose. And from this rested clarity, we return to life not dulled by inactivity, but sharpened by introspection and tested by internal order. We return not tired or timid, but composed and committed, grounded in a kind of strength that can only be forged in stillness and brought forth through deliberate, chosen rest. It is the paradox of rest. In yielding, we become more powerful. In pausing, we become more precise. It is not what we step away from that defines us. It is what we return to, and how we return, that reveals the strength of our inner foundation. Create a reasoning journal. During your hours of rest, ask yourself Stoic questions. What is in my control today? Where have I acted with virtue? Where have I been ruled by impulse? Let your rest be a lab for reflection. Chapter 3. Avoiding the vice of overwork. The Stoics warned us about excess. Temperance was a cardinal virtue to them, and excess, even in seemingly good things, is a vice in disguise. Overwork is not a sign of dedication. Often it's a sign of fear. Fear of being left behind, of confronting oneself, of being still. Epictetus cautioned his students against running after many things. He understood that the more a person scattered their attention across worldly pursuits, the more diluted their inner peace would become. He taught that to be truly free, one must simplify, not only their possessions, but their ambitions, their attachments, and their schedule. To be enslaved by the external is to constantly live for the expectations of others, for the approval of the crowd, and for the ever-shifting benchmarks of modern success. Overworking yourself to exhaustion is not a mark of devotion or discipline. It is servitude. It is submitting to an invisible master. It is a chasing of shadows, of phantoms that vanish as soon as you grasp them. What is often labeled as the grind today is, in Stoic terms, a form of compulsion, a disorder of the soul. It may masquerade as ambition, cloaked in the language of drive and purpose, but more often than not, it is a symptom of avoidance. It is easier to keep moving than to sit still and question whether we're on the right path. We chase work so we don't have to confront silence, because silence demands we listen. We flood our calendars to escape confronting the void within, the nagging doubt that perhaps all our striving is unmoored from true meaning. To always be on is to become reactive, not deliberate. It is to live according to the expectations of the crowd rather than the convictions of the soul. It is to measure your worth by your output and to confuse visibility with value, movement with meaning, and applause with self-respect. This is not vitality. It is velocity without direction, energy without orientation, existence without essence. The Stoics would warn that this is not self-mastery. It is self-abandonment masquerading as progress. It is the anxious scramble of a mind disconnected from its higher nature, running on the fumes of comparison, ego, and fear. It is the mind, like a horse without reins, galloping forward not toward a destination, but away from discomfort. When we say yes to every task, every opportunity, every distraction, we are not choosing strength. We are revealing our fear of stillness, of reflection, of facing the quiet truths within ourselves. We are hiding our spiritual hunger under the cloak of productivity. Rest then becomes more than a pause. It becomes a statement of identity. It is an act of rebellion against a culture that equates worth with output. It is an assertion of internal sovereignty, a conscious choice to govern your time with wisdom. It is a firm declaration that your value is not contingent on constant motion, nor is your dignity found in unchecked exhaustion. It is a refusal to be ruled by the pace of the marketplace or the noise of external demands, and instead a commitment to live by timeless principles rooted in clarity and stillness. Rest is the quiet strength that says, I am grounded enough to pause. I am clear enough to step back. I do not need to perform every second. I do not need to prove myself through endless exertion. I am already enough. It is the voice of resilience, not resignation. It speaks from a place of inner knowing, not external desperation. When you rest, you are not falling behind. You are stepping into a deeper alignment with yourself. You are sharpening your mind, restoring your spirit, and reminding your body that you are not a machine to be driven, but a soul to be guided. You are reconnecting with the sacred rhythm of life itself, the rhythm that includes movement and stillness, effort and ease. You are telling the world, and more importantly your own soul, I rest because I am wise, not because I am weak. I rest because I intend to endure, and endurance requires renewal. And in that space you rediscover that your greatest momentum is built not in the rush, but in the rhythm. And that rhythm, once honored, becomes the architecture of your strength, the harmony of your mind, and the foundation of a life lived with philosophical intention. Identify your compulsions. What drives you to stay up late working when your mind is screaming for pause? Write them down, then dismantle them using reason. Recognize that rest is not abandoning effort, it's sharpening the tool before you use it again. Just as a blade loses its edge through constant use, so too does the mind dull under the weight of unrelenting activity. Rest is the moment when the craftsman pauses, not to stop building, but to maintain the quality of his tools. It is the brief but essential stillness between breaths, the tuning of the instrument before the next performance. It is the philosopher stepping back from debate to read, to think, to feel, so that when they return with wisdom refined, not scattered thoughts. Rest does not diminish productivity, it refines it. It does not halt purpose, it strengthens it. To rest with intention is to prepare for your next act with integrity and excellence. Chapter 4. Rest and Emotional Clarity. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Rest is how we bring imagination back into reality's control. When we are exhausted, every problem seems larger, every conversation feels heavier, every decision becomes a burden. The tired mind is a dramatic mind. Rest allows for emotional reset. It gives us the space to disengage from the external chaos and listen inwardly. This is more than just stepping away. It is an invitation to re-enter the conversation with our deeper self. In moments of pause, we step back from the noise, not just the noise around us, but the noise within us. That internal chatter, driven by fear, doubt, pressure, and anxiety, begins to soften. Our thoughts, fears, and assumptions are often tangled together, distorting our perception and clouding our ability to choose wisely. When we rest, we untangle that web with patience and care. We see things clearly, more clearly than before, because we have granted ourselves distance. We recognize that some things we thought urgent are trivial. Some worries melt when observed in silence. We remember that not everything deserves a response, and not every emotion needs to be acted upon. Some are simply energy passing through us, and when we rest, we can allow them to pass without resistance. We begin to understand our triggers, not as fixed truths, but as signals pointing to unexamined parts of ourselves, fragments of pain, memory, or illusion waiting to be acknowledged. And in that understanding, we return to ourselves, not the self shaped by circumstance, but the self grounded in wisdom, discernment, and a calm center. The Stoics prized equanimity, calmness in the face of difficulty, as a hallmark of strength. It was not the absence of feeling, but the ability to master those feelings with the steady hand of reason. But it is hard to be calm when your nervous system is overwhelmed, when your heart is racing from accumulated tension, and your thoughts refuse to slow down. It is hard to reflect when your emotions have flooded reason and hijacked your decision-making process. In such a state, we do not live, we merely react. We are puppets pulled by invisible strings. Rest becomes a dam that contains the emotional overflow. It slows the rush. It drains the floodwaters slowly and gently and restores the clarity of dry land beneath our feet. It restores perspective, helps us to distinguish what is real from what is exaggerated by stress, and it brings us back to a place where we can observe our emotional landscape with more detachment. It gives us the courage to ask, is this emotion pointing to truth or simply echoing exhaustion? With that perspective, we regain our ability to choose our response instead of reacting blindly. We reclaim our composure, our reason, and our presence. We return not to a lesser version of ourselves, but to the truer one, centered, rational, and strong, not because we pushed harder, but because we paused long enough to let the truth rise. Take one afternoon each week to unplug entirely from your emotional triggers, news, social media, aggressive conversations. Let it become a sacred appointment with your inner self. Replace these external noise sources with stillness, quiet reflection, deep breathing, meditation, or a slow walk through a natural setting. Let the sights, sounds, and simplicity of the world around you become a mirror to the world within you. Use this time not only to disconnect, but to recollect, to reassemble your mental clarity and emotional resilience. Think of it as a recalibration of the nervous system, an emotional detox that allows you to face the next wave of responsibilities with inner steadiness. Reflect during these pauses. Where have your emotions felt most volatile or disproportionate? What small incidents have triggered outsized reactions? These are signs of deeper disturbances that need to be acknowledged, not ignored. Ask yourself, what is truly disturbing me and what am I magnifying due to exhaustion? Let this question sit with you. Journal about it. Meditate on it. Allow the truth to rise, not through force, but through space. In that gentle inquiry, you will often find that what seemed overwhelming was only so because your energy was depleted. Let rest give you clarity, and let that clarity protect your peace, preserve your energy, and guide your decisions with a steadier hand. Chapter 5. Rest as preparation for right action. Stoicism is not passive. The Stoic is a warrior of the soul, but a wise warrior rests. A wise warrior trains, reflects, and prepares. Constant fighting with no rest leads to defeat, not by the enemy, but by the self. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that each morning was a chance to rise and fulfill his role. But he also knew that strength came from order, and part of that order is rest. To rise with purpose, you must have slept in peace. To speak with clarity, you must have thought in silence. Rest is not the opposite of action. It is part of action. It is the unseen foundation upon which right effort is built and sustained. It is what prepares you for the real battles, within and without. When you commit to constant action without pause, you compromise your inner stability and become vulnerable to confusion, fatigue, and error. The mind, like the body, cannot perform at its highest level when drained and depleted. Without rest, the sharpness of thought fades and the strength of intention falters. The Stoics understood that the greatest victories, those over impulse, over fear, over injustice, require more than brute force. They require clarity, discernment, and composure, all of which are cultivated in rest, like steel tempered in fire and cooled in stillness. It is what lets you move with intention instead of being swept by impulse. It empowers you to choose the right course rather than blindly reacting to the pressures and noise of life. It grants you the pause that transforms reaction into deliberate response, providing the crucial space between stimulus and action where growth and maturity take root. It allows you to consider what truly matters and what deserves your attention, rather than being yanked from task to task by the tyranny of urgency. That pause becomes your center of power. It is the moment when you remember who you are, what your values are, and how you wish to respond to life, not from reactivity, but from calm clarity. When you are rested, your decisions are no longer reflexive, they are reflective. You do not move simply out of habit or social expectation, but from inner clarity. You assess your options not from panic or fatigue, but from poise. Your choices align with your principles, your direction remains steady, and your emotions no longer overpower your wisdom. You are no longer tossed about by every impulse or swayed by the urgency of others. You begin to see more clearly the path ahead, not as a blur of obligations, but as a trail marked by purpose and lit by insight. Rest strips away the fog and reveals the road beneath your feet. With it, you become less reactive and more proactive. You no longer confuse activity with progress or urgency with importance. You begin to ask, is this essential? And learn to silence the inner noise that insists you must do everything. Rest is not a break from virtue. It is the cradle in which virtue is nurtured and reborn. It is where courage regains its quiet force, where temperance restores balance, where justice finds calm authority, and where wisdom sharpens its edge through quiet introspection. The Stoic rests not to escape life, but to return to it stronger, more capable, and more prepared to meet its demands with integrity and resolve. Rest is a source of inner calibration, a return to the philosophical still point within you, the quiet center from which all principled action flows. In rest, you recover your judgment, renew your patience, and reaffirm your values. You rebuild the structure of your mind with intentional stillness. You gather your spirit for the tasks ahead, so that when you rise again, you rise with poise, resolve, and full command of your faculties. You do not stagger back into the world, disoriented or drained. You stride into it with composure, with a clear mind and a steady heart. You step back not to disengage, but to re-engage with power, purpose, and presence. The calm before the action is not passivity, it is mastery. It is the trained readiness of someone who has studied themselves in silence, who knows their values intimately, and who understands that rest is not a retreat, but a return to the battlefield of life with full awareness and full strength. This is the true discipline of the Stoic, knowing when to act and knowing when to be still. It is the harmony of motion and rest that cultivates greatness. Reframe rest in your mind. No longer see it as non-action. See it as the foundation of action, the hidden strength that fuels all meaningful momentum. Think of it as a vital ritual rather than an afterthought. Rest is not the void between moments of productivity. It is the womb from which clarity, resolve, and energy are born. Plan your rest the way you plan your work. Carve it out with precision. Honor it with the same seriousness that you reserve for your highest priorities. Let it be a space that signals to your mind and body, here I restore, here I prepare. Make it structured. Don't leave rest to chance or treat it as a luxury you'll indulge in if there's leftover time. Build it into your calendar with the same firmness you would for a crucial meeting or a deadline. Choose what kind of rest nourishes you, mental, physical, emotional, and design it deliberately. Make it sacred. Let it be free from guilt, comparison, or distraction. Protect it as a necessary sanctuary for reflection and renewal. Begin each week with a scheduled window of disconnection that prepares you for strategic re-engagement. Use this space to reflect, to breathe, to realign. Whether it's an afternoon walk, a long bath, an hour of reading or journaling, treat it as the sacred silence before a great performance. In that stillness, you are not wasting time. You are fortifying your spirit. That is the Stoic power of rest. Chapter 6. Rest as resistance to modern slavery. To rest is to resist. In today's hyper-connected world, it is not only noble but revolutionary to rest. We are no longer merely workers. We are products, metrics, clicks, and content. Algorithms never sleep, and increasingly, neither do we. But the Stoics remind us that freedom is an internal state before it is ever an external one. If you cannot choose to rest, you are not free. You are bound by fear, by comparison, by expectations not of your own making. The Stoics believed that true freedom begins with self-mastery. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can we master ourselves if we do not pause long enough to even meet ourselves? When our time is constantly scheduled, our thoughts constantly influenced, and our attention constantly fragmented, we become strangers to our own mind. Rest, in this modern sense, is a defiance of the system that profits from your exhaustion. It is a protest against a world that assigns your worth to your output and drowns your inner voice beneath metrics, deadlines, performance reviews, and constant engagement. It is not just stepping away from work, it is stepping back into your humanity. It is a bold return to stillness in a world that measures value by velocity. When you rest, you are choosing sovereignty over servitude. You are declaring that your life is not an endless performance, that your being is not reduced to a resume or a profile or a stream of deliverables. You are affirming that your essence lies not in productivity, but in presence. You are saying, "I do not exist solely to produce, perform, or impress. I exist to live, to think, to be. I am not a machine. I am a mind. I am a soul. I am not here to be efficient. I am here to be whole." This quiet act of resting is one of the most subversive things you can do in a society that thrives on your distraction and compliance. It is a reclaiming of rhythm, of silence, of purpose. It is a deliberate act of grounding yourself in what cannot be monetized, your dignity, your inner world, your peace. And this is not mere rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is deeply Stoic, because the Stoics understood that to be guided by reason and virtue, one must be free from compulsion, both internal and external. They knew that a life ruled by the expectations of others is not truly lived. They taught that compulsion is slavery, and that real power comes from living in accordance with your nature, not the demands of a restless society. And overworking, this modern idol of hustle, is just that. Compulsion dressed up as commitment. It is a noble disguise for spiritual disarray. It is the illusion of progress hiding the reality of self-neglect. Rest reveals that. Rest removes the mask. It shows us what remains when we are no longer trying to be seen, and in that stillness, we often find our truest self, the one not distorted by noise or need, but clear, present, and free. Design moments of refusal into your week. Say no to an obligation. Postpone a task that demands urgency but lacks necessity. Turn off notifications. Fast from digital noise. Practice being unavailable, not out of arrogance, but as a sacred act of reclaiming your time, your energy, and your soul. Chapter 7. Rest and the expansion of inner life. Rest is not only recovery, it is expansion. When we rest, we do not simply recharge, we open ourselves to the inner life that is so often drowned by outer demands. In rest, the mind is free to wander not aimlessly but curiously. Questions arise, ideas spark, thoughts deepen. We connect the dots that action alone cannot see. Seneca wrote often about the need for solitude and introspection. He knew that silence and stillness were not luxuries, but conditions in which philosophical thought matures, where the soul is nourished. He understood that wisdom requires space, uninterrupted, unscheduled, sacred space for contemplation. Rest invites us into that deeper space. It is the soil in which wisdom grows, not hurried or forced, but cultivated gently through quiet. It allows the unseen parts of our soul to speak, the subtle layers of our thoughts to rise from the noise and be heard for the first time. In these quiet moments, we encounter a truth too often buried beneath our routines, that insight and self-awareness are not products of speed, but of stillness. They are not found in the noise of a full day, but in the hush of a reflective one. If you never rest, you never meet yourself in full. You skim your life like a stone on the surface of water, fast, momentarily impressive, but never penetrating. Depth is reserved for the still. Rest is the moment the stone sinks, not in despair, but in stillness. And in that stillness, you discover richness, not noise. You remember things long forgotten. You reconnect with truths that daily demands have silenced. You sit with emotions that have long been buried beneath activity and ambition. You allow them to teach you. You begin, at last, to hear your own voice unclouded by interference. And this voice, once heard, begins to guide you, not with the force of urgency, but with the assurance of clarity. You begin to live less from reaction and more from inner vision. Rest is where creativity is born. It's where emotional depth develops, and where the unseen architecture of the soul starts to take shape. It's the spacious terrain in which original ideas, not recycled thoughts, emerge with clarity and integrity. In a rested mind, new connections form across distant memories. Insights surface from emotional layers long ignored, and seemingly unrelated thoughts unite into patterns that feel inevitable and fresh. This is not accidental, it is the fruit of conscious quiet. It's where you remember what is essential, not just urgent. It's where the imagination stretches without pressure, where insight is allowed to unfold in its own time, free from the demand to produce or perform. It is the creative mind's sacred ground, a field where thoughts mature like crops grown in fertile soil rather than rushed through artificial light. When we rest, we give ourselves the grace of patience, and that patience unlocks genius that pressure never can. Solutions appear not from force but from flow, like a river finding its natural course through the valley, reshaping the land not by strain, but by persistence, ease, and harmony with gravity. Rest nurtures this flow. It gives creativity the room it needs to emerge without command, and it gives the truth a chamber quiet enough to echo through. It lets creativity breathe and lets truth echo, because in silence, the soul speaks clearly. It reminds us that brilliance isn't born in burnout, but in balance. It's not forged in haste, but in harmony. The inner life is not a luxury. It is not something reserved for monks, poets, or philosophers. It is the very foundation of a meaningful life, for without a strong inner life, the outer world becomes a hollow theater of appearances. Without it, all outer accomplishments are hollow, like a beautifully constructed shell with nothing inside, a palace echoing with emptiness, a tower with no foundation that topples under the weight of unchecked striving. To rest is to tend to that inner chamber, to dust off the forgotten corners of your mind, to bring light into the quiet rooms of your being, to make it whole again. It is to close the external gates and sit quietly in your own presence. It is a return to essence. It is the rediscovery of values long buried under noise. It is to ensure that the person who accomplishes is the same one who contemplates, who feels, who doubts, and who knows why it all matters. And in doing so, it transforms what you do into a reflection of who you are. Not a distortion, not a mask, not a desperate projection, but an honest extension of your rested, resilient, and radiant self. This is the art of living the Stoics spoke of. Not mere survival, but an examined life with space to feel its truth. Make time each week for what feeds your inner world. Reading, reflecting, writing, long walks without your phone, even staring into space with no agenda. Do not call this doing nothing. Call it soul maintenance. It's where depth begins. Chapter 8. Rest and the practice of detachment. One of the core principles of Stoicism is detachment, not from life itself, but from outcomes beyond our control. The Stoics never advised apathy, they advised clarity. Detachment does not mean disconnection. It means freedom from the emotional entanglement that distorts our perception and weakens our resilience. But detachment is not something we achieve only through logic. It is something we must feel. And feeling it requires space. It requires rest. Just as a muscle cannot heal under continuous strain, neither can the soul detach while under constant pressure. When we are constantly working, constantly immersed in tasks, we become over-attached. We lose the necessary separation between effort and identity. Our sense of self becomes welded to our results. Our identity fuses with our performance. We begin to feel that we are what we produce. Our confidence rises and falls on metrics, approval, or praise. And when that production falters, or worse, is ignored, we suffer. We mistake temporary failure for existential worthlessness. The soul collapses beneath expectations it was never meant to carry alone. The Stoics remind us that what we do is not who we are, that our worth is measured not by recognition, but by reason. The essence of our identity is not in our accomplishments, but in our character, our virtues, and our ability to live in alignment with truth. Rest gives us the necessary distance to remember this. In stepping back, we find ourselves again. In rest, we step outside the frame of expectation and performance. We step off the stage and into the quiet backstage of the soul, where our truest self waits to be acknowledged. We can pull back. We can observe without judgment. We can watch ourselves objectively, like a friend offering clarity rather than critique. We can reflect with both compassion and dispassion, holding ourselves gently but honestly. We can detach our self-worth from the results of our efforts, releasing the illusion that our value is earned by outcomes. We are reminded that our value is intrinsic, not conditional, not earned, not granted by outcomes or others, but present by virtue of being a rational, reflective being. In that remembrance, we are healed. This is not disengagement. This is mastery, the ability to act without attachment, to strive without desperation. This is the control that comes from clarity, not from control itself. It is the quiet authority of someone who knows they are enough, with or without applause. The Stoic who can rest in detachment is not careless, but clear. They are not lazy, but liberated. Their rest is not an absence of effort, but a demonstration of discipline. They understand that rest is not avoidance. It is alignment with nature, with virtue, with reason. They do what they can, with excellence and focus, and then they let go, not out of indifference, but out of wisdom, and that letting go is only possible with regular rest. Only through rest can we create the mental spaciousness needed to hold success and failure with the same calm hand, to remain whole when things fall apart, and to walk forward unshaken either way. Rest makes us steady. It makes us sovereign. It gives us back to ourselves. Reflect on one area of your life where you are overly attached to the outcome. During your rest period, consciously observe your emotions around it. Then say aloud, "I control my effort, not the result." Let rest soften the grip of control. Chapter 9. Rest as alignment with nature. To the Stoics, living in accordance with nature was the highest good. But nature does not rush. Nature moves in seasons, in tides, in rhythms that have endured for millennia without need for urgency. A seed does not bloom before its time. The moon does not apologize for its cycles. And yet, modern life pulls us out of sync with this natural harmony. We live in deadlines, alerts, constant notifications, and an expectation of perpetual motion. We are conditioned to believe that stillness is idleness and that rest is an obstacle to success. Rest is how we return to nature. It is how we realign ourselves with the rhythm that our biology and our spirit understand, even if our culture does not. Just as nature retreats before it renews, so must we. A body without rest becomes ill, physically weakened, vulnerable to exhaustion and imbalance. A mind without rest becomes bitter, cynical, reactive, and closed off to insight. A soul without rest becomes lost, disconnected from its values, its wonder, its depth. Rest is not a retreat from responsibility, it is a return to sanity. When you rest, you are not withdrawing from your purpose, you are returning to it. Rest clarifies purpose. It removes the clutter so you can see what matters. A tree does not grow faster because we shout at it. It grows because it follows the seasons, patient, rooted, and attuned to the light. And so must we. Rest is not the abandonment of growth, but its most honest condition. It is nature's way of preparing for renewal, not its absence. When we rest, we allow ourselves to be guided again by reality, not by noise, not by demand, not by the artificial metrics of modern ambition. We root ourselves back into something ancient, something wise, something sustainable. We are no longer pushing against the grain of nature but flowing with it, listening to its quiet instruction. In honoring our need for rest, we honor the very structure of existence itself. We stop resisting the cycle and we begin to live within it. Pay attention to your natural rhythms. Your body and mind speak in cycles. Honor them. Notice when you feel most alert and inspired, and when you feel drained or agitated. These signals are not distractions from productivity, they are essential guides to it. When you ignore your internal cues, you trade vitality for short bursts of output, often at the cost of sustainability. Learn to observe the times of day or week when your energy naturally rises and falls. Rather than forcing yourself to conform to arbitrary expectations, align your rest and activity with your true energy flow. Schedule your rest according to energy, not obligation. If you feel mentally foggy or emotionally overwhelmed, that is not a sign of weakness. It is your inner nature asking for recalibration. Trust it. Make time for restoration before burnout demands it. Make rest proactive, not reactive. Live your days like seasons, not factories. Spring bursts with ideas. Summer invites focused building. Autumn reflects on what must be let go. Winter calls for stillness. This is how nature moves, and it is how we thrive when we stop resisting our design. When you begin to live in tune with your inner seasons, every task becomes more mindful, more intentional, and more powerful. Chapter 10. Rest as the final strength. We have come full circle. Rest is not weakness. It is the final form of strength. It is not avoidance. It is wisdom. It is not an interruption. It is integration. It is the sacred pause that reminds us we are not here to merely function. We are here to flourish. Marcus Aurelius, burdened with the weight of an empire, still reminded himself to seek the quiet within. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He knew what we are only beginning to remember, that rest is where meaning is remembered, not manufactured. To rest well is to live well. It is to affirm your humanity in a culture that wants machines, machines that never stop, never question, never falter. Rest is the great declaration that you are not a machine. You are a human being with breath and blood and spirit, not just a cog in someone else's system. It is to reclaim your right to be slow, to be thoughtful, to be whole. It is to say, I am not defined by my output, but by my essence. Rest is how we honor the soul behind the striving, the self behind the schedule. It is how we make space for wonder, reflection, and presence to return to our days. It is to cultivate clarity in a world that worships speed. In a culture that equates acceleration with advancement, rest is the moment we realize that going fast in the wrong direction is not progress, it is panic. Rest slows us down just enough to see clearly, to see what matters, to see what we've been running past, to see ourselves. And it is to practice courage, not the courage to push through, but the courage to pause, to stop when the world demands we keep going, to reflect when others rush, to step back when all the noise urges us to press forward. It takes bravery to be still. It takes strength to be silent. The Stoics did not run from the world, and neither should we. But they knew that to face the world with strength, one must return regularly to stillness. Strength without stillness becomes aggression. Power without pause becomes recklessness. Rest is not the end of discipline. It is its highest expression, because it shows we are not ruled by urgency, but by understanding. Not by fear of falling behind, but by faith that our value does not vanish when we rest. Rest is how the disciplined sharpen their edge. It is not the opposite of effort. It is what makes effort sustainable, wise, and true. Let your final rest each week be one of gratitude, a sacred ceremony, however small, in which you return to the center of yourself. Reflect not only on what you've done, but how you've lived. Did you move through your days with integrity? Did you speak with care? Did you stay true to what matters, even when it was hard? Let these questions surface in the quiet, not as judgment, but as gentle inquiry. Measure not your speed, but your sincerity. Were your actions aligned with your values, or simply reactions to pressure? Measure not your output, but your peace. What did you protect within yourself this week? What did you preserve in your spirit? A rested soul can answer these questions honestly. It can hear the truth without fear. Let your rest be a return to what is timeless. Let it be the moment you drop the burdens that do not belong to you and breathe without agenda. Let your final rest each week remind you not of how far you must go, but of how far you've already come. Let it be where strength regenerates, where vision refocuses, and where your spirit simply exists, unjudged, undriven, and whole. Rest deeply. You've earned it, not because you were productive, but because you are human.